the right things on the right side and the wrong things on the wrong side.
Cosine equals 87 divided by 105, the square root of 105.
I mean, I can't always be their little girl.
Adolescence. It's a time of dramatic change, from childhood to adulthood. It's a time of new experiences and consuming self-reflection. During these sometimes turbulent years, teenagers struggle to redefine their relationships with others and figure out who they are and what they will become.
If you look in the newspapers or radio, television, film, the images we have of adolescence are kind of synonymous with trouble, either troubled individuals or trouble for society.
Being young to adults isn't a plus. They have like this phobia about teenagers. They think they're hoodlums or something.
It turns out that there's no empirical basis for this belief. There's no evidence that adolescence is an inherently more difficult period than any other period in the lifespan.
Parents are probably the worst thing. It's got to be.
It is true that there is some increase in conflict as adolescents try to sort of sort it out with their parents. That is, who's going to be responsible for what, under what conditions can I make autonomous decisions, and when do I need to be in touch with you. But those seem to be normative processes. They are things that every adolescent and family go through together.
In fact, only about 20% of adolescents experience the kind of turmoil and chaos that requires any kind of intervention or help. And the majority, the other 80%, have their problems, have their battles with their parents and their difficulties with their friends, and go through their ups and downs in terms of self-esteem. But in fact, negotiate adolescence fairly successfully and feel good about that period of their lives.
I'll let it in. Make it even.
You put too much black on. That's what you did.
The dramatic process of leaving childhood and developing an adult identity occurs in stages as teenagers try on new roles.
The other side of the stage, or somebody else has to do it for me.
Initially, they're very intent on themselves, how they look, how other people react to them, what their friends think of them, particularly what their friends think of them. Are they socially successful? Those are issues that are very important to them.
Got it. Thank you. Hello.
Around mid-adolescence, they become very future-oriented. Kids really have a lot of different concerns that they spend time thinking about during this period. They think about how they're going to look when all of these changes take place. How are they going to be able to pursue their career successfully or pursue a career? Are they going to be able to actually find someone who will love them and who will marry them and who will settle down with them?
It's really very reasonable, isn't it, that a young person who is changing so dramatically in so many ways should need to spend a good deal of time thinking about what in the world is happening and trying to make some sense of these extraordinary bodily, interpersonal, and social changes.
And has the dubious distinction of being my uncle.
All right, eyes are first.
I can't stand it.
Come in. Yes, can I get you anything? Anything. Just name it. Anything.
Down, boy.
Self-absorption, to a degree at least, is a healthy impulse on the part of adolescents. Trying to sort it out, trying to figure out who am I, trying to make sense of experience is something that should be encouraged and not laughed at.
It's hard to have people understand you, and they don't give you your full potential because you're young.
Wanting more responsibility and more freedoms, but not being able to get it because, you know, your parents, you're still under your control of your parents, and they don't want to give you all the freedom you want, and it's kind of a power struggle that goes on.
The worst thing about being a teenager would be just trying to grow up and learn about life, I guess.
The goal of adolescence would be to prepare yourself to make those decisions for early adulthood. It would be difficult to prepare for past that, but at least what you want to do is be ready to make some decisions about where you're going to work, where you're going to school, what kind of job you're going to get, what kind of relationships one is going to have. So it's important by the end of adolescence to be ready to make those kinds of decisions. And those adolescents who aren't are the ones who feel most lost, who are directionless, who really haven't developed an identity. They haven't developed a sense of themselves.
When Lily over here mentioned about the sanitarium changing hands, you tried to stop her.
The picture gets really complicated because there's more than a single self. And a task of adolescence is to develop multiple selves that are somehow still integrated into a single self. And many adolescents navigate that transition very smoothly. However, for other adolescents, particularly around age 15, we're finding they get tremendously troubled by the fact that they are one way with their girlfriend, a different way as a student, a different way at home, and they'll say things like, I just don't understand it. With my parents, I get depressed and moody, but with my friends, I'm very cheerful. How can that be? Which is the real me? And they agonize about it.
You like that, wouldn't you?
Worst thing about being a teenager is, I suppose, one of the things is I can't vote yet, so I have to sit there and let everybody else elect people that I can't stand.
Most of them are going to get through this time and remember it as a good time in their life, and they will land on their feet and go on to be productive adults. They will have their dilemmas. They will also remember it as a time when they had to struggle, but sometimes struggle strengthens your confidence. That's part of the identity picture, is to struggle to define who one is. And once you come through the struggle, you feel more confident in yourself.
What do you think, the mustache? A little. I'll work with it.
What has happened since the turn of the century is that young people, teenagers, spend more and more time with other teenagers. So many teenagers, starting about 7 a.m. in the morning when their friends pick them up if they have an early class, go through the day with other teenagers. If they have part-time jobs, they work with other teenagers. If they're in after-school activities, that's with other teenagers. They come home and then they get on the phone for 2 hours with other teenagers, so that their central and primary group shifts from being the family to other adolescents.
She's like weird.
Oh. Oh, today she wore makeup like for the first time or something. And then Steve's all, I thought you didn't wear makeup. I thought your parents were real strict. And she goes, well, not really. You know, I just do it whatever. Steve's all, I thought it was a preference. You know, I thought you didn't want to wear them. So he thought, well,
friendships may contribute something to a child's development not found in the family.
Paranoid. She just, ooh, bothers me.
I hate when was Steve going after her for a while?
And she didn't go out with him.
In his face.
And then
she was going for Jenny not Fulford.
The peer group offers needed challenges to self-conceptions that the adolescent has, to values that the adolescent may not have thought through. The adolescent peer group also offers meaningful emotional support to adolescents in times of stress. Youngsters who don't have friends aren't happy youngsters.
It's okay if you have it, it's okay if you haven't now.
I agree.
Because I know lots of people that depends on the reasons.
For girls, maybe.
For girls, maybe
For
what?
girls.
Oh, I know. For guys, it's like.
For guys, it's like I did her.
Yeah, guys get this attitude like.
Why do they do that?
They
I
do.
just
I
know that.
Like I've done like 5 girls all in one night and stuff.
Young people today feel that there are lots of pressures on them to have sex. They have trouble trying to take those pressures to have sex and put that sex in the context of a relationship that involves love and caring. They feel they don't get time to think it out, that the pressure is just on them to go to bed with somebody. And that's where the pressure is, and no one really helps them sit down and think out sex in the context of a relationship, and they can't talk to their parents about what I'm talking about now. They can't ask their parents, how do you put sex and a relationship together, because in many cases, the subject is so frightening that the parents won't discuss it.
I can't share with my mom, like, well, what do you do in this situation?
Even if not sexually active, teenagers typically learn about intimacy from friends.
I was joking.
Why is he in jail?
I have a sister and she's in 7th grade and she learned, I mean, the stuff she already knows about, I'm like, I don't learn that in 7th grade.
Seriously, what happened to childhood innocence?
I know.
Did
Not
your parents
anymore.
tell you? Like,
No.
your mom comes up to you?
No.
You just never?
Never.
You don't talk about sex at home at all?
Not really, no.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Adolescence and late adolescence are times for working on what it means to develop a close relationship with somebody other than a family member. This is a precursor to the formation of intimate adult relationships, but it's important in a non-sexual sense as well. One of the things we know from the literature on social support is that people who have close ties with other people generally are better off from a psychological point of view. They are less depressed. Having close friendships, having supportive relationships with others buffers them or protects them against bad outcomes in times of stress. And there's reason to think that adolescence is the time when kids need to practice close relationships with other people.
While most teenagers build and benefit from close relationships, some do not.
We can look at adolescents who have a great deal of conflict with their peers. When we observe them, they have a very high number of disagreements and arguments. What we've seen is that these adolescents also participate in family interactions and negotiations, which are also charged with conflict, and also with conflict resolution patterns that involve somebody losing or somebody winning, but not a cooperative resolution to the conflict. On the other hand, when we see adolescents with their peers who are able to collaborate in conflict resolution, and by that I mean they're able to take both people's points of view and blend them together into a kind of cooperative agreement to their conflict, those adolescents have a very different pattern of experience with their parents. When we observe them with their parents, we see that they participate in negotiations in which that same kind of collaborative approach to conflict can be seen in their conversational patterns.
If it's my mom, then she'll just say, okay, just make sure you're home on time or whatever. But if it's my dad, he'll go like, be home at 12 exactly after like whatever homecomings are. And I'm all, no, Dad, and then we're going to go do whatever. He's all, what are you going to do? Where are you going to be? Give me your phone number. Mom, okay, the hotel's no. And I'm all, I don't know, we're just going to get some ice cream or something. And then, so he'll go, okay, 12:30. And I'm all, no, 1:30. So we'll sit there and we'll negotiate. And then he'll say 12:30 again, and I'll say, I'll see you at 1. And then I'll come home around.
People are open about expressing their disagreements, but they also participate in a give and take that allows them not only to hear the other person's point of view, but also to blend it together with their own in a productive and cooperative agreement. And this has given us evidence then that differences among adolescents in their ability to live successfully with their friends may originate in their experiences in the family.
One of the stereotypes about teenage development is that the peer group kind of takes over and parents no longer are influences on their children's behavior. Now I guess about 5 years ago, we were studying this phenomenon in a sample of early adolescent children. These were kids between the ages of 10 and 14, and what we found was that certain kinds of parenting practices were associated with competence in adolescence, better school performance, higher self-esteem, and so forth. What we've been doing recently is to move this set of studies on to looking at older kids, and we're still finding, once again, that even during the late high school years, even, let's say, during the junior and senior years of high school, parents remain important influences on their teenagers' development and growth.
What are you doing tonight? Are you going to stay home and watch her?
No. When 15-year-old Katie and 13-year-old Thomas became teenagers, their parents found the transition a challenge for the family.
It happened overnight. All of a sudden, you know, we had adolescents in the house. It just seemed to happen so quickly.
I can remember one day of Katie just talking back to me, and I grabbed her arm to turn her around to look at her and make eye contact with her, and she looked at me right eye to eye, and it was like, whoa, there's this big kid here.
I used to be a lot more emotional than I am now about things. I think I kind of am growing out of that, like talking back all the time. I mean, I still do that, but it's just not, I like start screaming and throw a tantrum and stuff like that. I think I'm pretty much getting out of that.
Katie mentioned a few weeks ago that Thomas was having difficulties and he gets upset easily, and she said, "Guy, Mom, I was like that about a year ago." So I already see changes in her, and I already see her growing through it. And now Thomas is right in the boiler. He's right in the middle of it.
My parents expect more things out of me because, like, in the younger, like, when I was younger in, like, school, they wouldn't, like, if I got a C or something on my report card, they wouldn't care as much. But now they're starting to get on me about it.
One of the things that we've tried to do, maybe not as much as we'd like to do, is be a little more educated about what they're going through, both physically and emotionally, so maybe we can be a little bit better prepared for these things. It seems like the first one is always your hardest experience, and since we have 4, hopefully by the time when we get through the last one, we'll have it down a little better.
In healthy families, the level of warmth doesn't change as parents make the transition with their child into adolescence, as they stay close and connected to each other. In those families, parents tend to become a little bit more permissive behaviorally because it's appropriate, especially in our society, for kids to have a little more freedom as they get older.
I get to go places without my parents, and I get to drive in cars with guys now. My parents just have to know them, so before they never let me do anything like that.
I don't like to set hard, fast rules. I'm not a real rule person, and I think when you do that, you're kind of boxing yourself in. I like to take each situation as it comes and size it up and go from there.
Oh, I think for me, it's letting a little string out at a time. You know, as they get older, you have more leeway, but you can't just all of a sudden just give them a lot of total freedom all at one time, because it would be too hard to handle, I think.
Parents in healthy families give their kids increasingly more psychological space as they let them become individuals, a process that we call individuation. And what we find and what others find is that the most competent adolescents come from families in which they're allowed to individuate, but in which they stay attached or connected to their parents at the same time.
Those parents who have a difficult time with adolescence are usually the ones who are very frightened of losing their adolescent. They're very frightened that as their kid grows up, that he or she is going to leave them and not come back, that their relationship is going to be over, and that the adolescent is going to just grow up and move away and never come home again. And those are the parents who hold on and often do themselves more damage than good. The parents who are able to allow their adolescents to do the separation and individuation that they need to do are the ones who, in the long run, hold on to the relationships and have healthier, more intimate relationships with their adolescents.
I think what confuses many parents is that their kids want to take over the decision-making, or at least have shared decision-making. So on the one hand, they want to be independent, but at the same time, they still need their parents' support and affirmation. And it's hard to fight somebody on one level and then be loving and affirming toward them on the other.
You think about having children and having a baby and having little children growing up, and then all of a sudden you have this person that's almost like an adult, but not quite, and they need rules to follow, and they're talking back to you, and it's not always what you had planned.
He said that it was really good. He really liked it.
Yeah, what he liked the technique, did you?
He liked the colors and...
While teenagers seek greater independence, they also need and are shaped by parental support.
I think it's a very good exercise for you.
One of the things that we know is that the actual level of support that kids and adolescents receive is very powerful predictor of their self-esteem. But more recently, we've discovered another kind of take on the whole notion of support, and it's really come from our adolescents who've said things like, yeah, my parents are usually there, they're supportive, but only if I meet their very high levels of expectation. So if I get all A's, they'll support me. If I get a B, the support will be withdrawn. In other families, athletic competence is very important. So that if the child doesn't make the varsity football team and disappoints the parents, then the support is withdrawn. And what's interesting is that these adolescents feel not only the support is coming and going, but that even when it's there, it's not very supportive.
How should I put this in, behind it?
Parent concern about a child's performance has another side as well.
Yeah, that's fine. It's not automatic that every kid's just going to make it into whatever life choice they want, jobs, schools, whatever it might be. Parents know that. So many parents are very careful to help their kids. They're there as supporters of their kids, lifting them up into society, helping them, giving them whatever resources they have. And I think you could add all kinds of other factors that would suggest that there isn't a lot of payoff to turmoil on either side, the parents or the child's. If you think about it in a practical sense, what's going on is parents realize that you've got to help the kid get into society.
You know where you're supposed to stop?
That's the goal. This isn't always going to be my child in my family.
This is good experience for you, so that when you guys get out there, you graduate.
So they're quite happy, in general, to help this transition along. So they're quite happy to change the relationship, give the adolescent more responsibility, let the adolescent think for herself. Until the adolescent proves that they're making basic mistakes or a lot of mistakes, parents help this thing along. So the idea of turmoil kind of goes down, and more the idea of support goes up.
A key part of the socialization that takes place within the family is that parents are quite simply socializing their children to be productive members of society, that's what we're trying to do within a family. But that your definition or your sense of what does it take to be a productive member of society is largely based on what your work experiences are like. So, you know, take me, a college professor. The real challenge for me is how to handle this enormous amount of autonomy. There are very few times where I have to be at a specific place at a specific time. And so the idea would be, if I were raising a child, I would want them to learn how to handle autonomy, in a sense, you know, how to structure their own time, that I would be telling them less what to do. And not only that, but then if my child were to say, no, I don't want to do that, that it wouldn't be that big a deal. That in fact I might say, in some cases, well, you have to, but there might be kind of a secret smile. Hey, you know, this kid has spunk. Let's say, in contrast to that, you have someone who works in a factory. There, the real demands on you as a factory worker are to take your needs for autonomy, your ideas, and really subjugate them to the boss. You know, your role isn't to come up with new and creative ways of doing things, but rather to do what the boss tells you. So if you're coming from that kind of an environment and your child gives you lip, you're going to get a lot more upset because you're wondering, how is this kid ever going to make it in the world? if they can't just say yes.
Dr. Caussé and her research team use such insights to focus on ethnic minority groups.
Well, what would happen if we end up dropping the parenting scale that has nurturance on it? Wouldn't that ruin our latent variable? There is bits and pieces of research that tend to suggest that particularly African American parents are more controlling of their children. And there are some folks who then talk about that being cultural, when in fact I think if one begins to look at the context of a population where poverty and ethnicity in this country are very confounded, or socioeconomic status and ethnicity are very confounded, that some of the things that we may be talking about as culture really has much more to do with the fact that families of different ethnicities are growing up under very different material conditions. We're finding that the work environment, neighborhood environment, and family environment are influencing not only externalizing behaviors, acting out, but that they're also having an influence on internalizing behavior, whether you're depressed or anxious. Our preliminary results do suggest that the more autonomous parents are at their workplace, the less controlling they are of their children. So if they experience autonomy, they give their children more autonomy. And we're seeing that kind of link. Then we're seeing the link between autonomy or control and outcomes. In fact, this is kind of, in some ways, counterintuitive, but I think makes a lot of sense, that the more restrictive the parents are, the more controlling they are, the more the kids are rebelling.
Bring up second down. Adolescence sometimes brings turmoil. It also brings maturity. As teenagers grow, they redefine their relationships with their parents, their friends, and their society. They seek out their place, gradually merging into the adult world, a child no more.